my friends, welcome back to Thuya Hill. I'm very glad to have you here today. The holidays are upon us, the weather is cool, and it's a perfect time to get started making our families those beloved holiday treats. Now, I'm sure each of you has your own traditions that you do during the holiday season, and I wanted to share with you today a tradition of my family's that goes way back. My mother has been making this special Swedish Christmas tea ring for as long as I can remember, and even though it's not something that I make every year, I do have a particular fondness for this special bread. Now, last year I showed you how to make a Romanian kozenak. There are 1,001 variations of how to make that. You can add more eggs or less eggs. You can add nuts and cocoa and cinnamon and sugar and fruit and a variety of things. And what I'm realizing is the consistency among many cultures to have a traditional sweet bread with nuts and cinnamon and sugar and cocoa of sorts. And this is a Swedish take on that. This is a recipe my mother made for as many Christmases as I can remember. It was something we generally enjoyed on Christmas morning, similar to the Romanian kozenak that I shared last year, and the taste is just as good. Now, this bread is very special because it has the addition of cardamom, which is quintessentially a favorite of the Swedes and makes for a very delightful tasting bread. This bread is not as fluffy as the kozenak, but it has a bit of a spongy consistency. This bread is special in that it is formed into a ring and glazed with a beautiful icing and topped with dried cherries for added embellishment. It's a beautiful treat to serve your family on Christmas morning, and I hope that you enjoy today's recipe. So without further ado, it's time to go ahead and make our Christmas Swedish bread. Come on, let's go. All right, well, the first things first for this bread, and that is getting our yeast mixture prepared. So to get this started, we are gonna add a 1/4 cup of warm water mixed with 4½ teaspoons of active dry yeast and a pinch of sugar to get this yeast activated. All right, it's been about 10 minutes, and as you can see, our yeast has very much been activated. And what we're gonna do next is heat 1/2 cup of butter on the stove in a saucepan. And once the butter is melted, we're gonna add in a cup of whole milk and a teaspoon of salt. And we're just gonna stir that mixture on the stove gently. Okay, so I've melted together my milk, salt, and butter into a saucepan, and I'm just gonna let it cool for a little bit now. In the meantime, I am gonna go ahead and add my activated yeast to my bowl. Now, it's really important that you wait for your butter, milk, and salt mixture to cool before adding it to your yeast, because of course you don't wanna kill your yeast. And anything too hot will do that. So my mixture appears to be just about ready. So in the meantime, we're gonna go ahead and add a teaspoon of cardamom. This is where the good stuff starts. This is one of my favorite spices of all time. It's just so Christmassy to me. And we're gonna add our 2 eggs. And now we're gonna add our butter, salt, and milk mixture. It's a perfect temperature to add in to our yeast and eggs and cardamom. Okay, once we have added that, we're gonna stir this all together, and then we'll get on adding our flour. Okay, now that our eggs and our cardamom are all mixed into our butter, salt, and milk, and our activated yeast mixture, we're gonna add 2 cups of flour, and then we're gonna stir. And once that's stirred together, then we'll add in our additional 2½ cups of flour. Here's 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Here's our 2nd cup of all-purpose flour, and we'll go ahead and stir that. This just makes it easier so you don't have a big bunch of flour to stir in all at once. And now that that's blended together nicely, we're gonna add 2½ cups more of all-purpose flour. As you get on baking this bread, you may find that you need more or less flour depending on the type of flour you use, what type of milk you use, how big your eggs are. You'll see as you make this if you need more or less flour. All right, it's coming together now into a nice dough. All right, I am gonna use my hands in a minute here to begin kneading this. And we're gonna knead it for about 3 to 5 minutes and get it into a nice little ball in our bowl. All right, our dough is all mixed together. As you can see here, it's in the shape of a nice ball. One thing I did want to mention, I forgot to add my ½ cup of brown sugar to my melted butter, milk, and salt mixture on the stove. That is something that you will want to do before. However, if you forget like I did today, you can always add it to the dough while you're kneading it. And that's what I did. The brown sugar has just mixed in there very nicely, and it gives the dough a very subtle sweet flavor. So now that this bread is all mixed together and has been sufficiently kneaded, I am going to put it in a warm spot and cover it for the next 1.5 hours or so until the dough has doubled in size. All right, friends, it's been a couple of hours, and as you can see, my dough has risen sufficiently. I'm gonna flour my counter right now and roll this dough out into a long rectangle. It smells really good. We're gonna put this on our counter, spread out our flour a little bit, and get our rolling pin and get on rolling. One of the things I love about Christmas baking is it conjures up so many memories of family and celebrations. Each Christmas I make just a couple things. I try not to overdo it. I find that making a simple Christmas bread and a batch of gingerbread cookies is a good amount of Christmas baking for our family. You can divide this dough into 2 and make 2 smaller Swedish tea rings. I am going to be making 1 large one today, but if you prefer to make 2, you can freeze one for Christmas and eat one now. Okay, definitely not a perfect rectangle, but quite good enough. We're gonna spread this with room temperature butter and sprinkle the top with cinnamon sugar. So you'll need about a ½ cup of brown sugar and about 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and another ½ cup of raisins. Once you have this all sprinkled with your cinnamon sugar, you're gonna wanna put your raisins on top. And then we'll get to the really fun part of folding and making our ring. Okay, so we've got our bread all coated with butter, which is always a good thing. And now we're gonna sprinkle this with our cinnamon sugar mixture. Honestly, what could be better than cinnamon sugar and butter on dough? It's just such a divine combination. And now we're gonna get on putting our raisins in. We're using ½ cup of raisins today. These will just be interspersed throughout the bread. And now the really fun part is rolling this together. We're gonna go ahead and just roll our bread into a beautiful log. Now we are gonna be baking this bread on a greased pizza stone. We're gonna take our Christmas bread and we're gonna transfer it to our pizza stone. Try to get it so that it's seam side down. That will make for a lovelier loaf in terms of presentation. Okay, so as you can see here, I have combined my edges and it's shaped into a nice little donut shape. And now I'm gonna get my scissors and I'm gonna snip about 12 to 15 slices in this ring to make for a pretty design. By doing this, you're gonna get a lovely design in your ring and it will show off that cinnamon swirl in the middle with the raisins. All right, so now I've got my ring all snipped and we're gonna take the edges and we're gonna kind of pull them apart just a little bit so that they cook in kind of a fancy shape in the oven. You can just give them a little twist. As you can see here, I have got the bread all cut and twisted, and now we're gonna let it rise for another 30 to 45 minutes in a warm spot. Once it's risen again for the second time, we will stick it in the oven and bake it. So my bread has been rising for the last 30 to 45 minutes. It's done its second rise, and as you can see, it's gotten quite a bit bigger since I rolled it out. It's actually ready for the oven now. So we're gonna bake it at 350 for the next 25 to 30 minutes. After that, we're gonna let it just sit and cool for a while because we don't wanna put the frosting on when it's hot. We want the bread to be completely cooled. Once it's sufficiently cooled, we will ice it with our special homemade icing, top it with our beautiful dried cherries, and it will be ready to eat. All right, so while the bread is baking is an ideal time to get on making the icing that goes on top of the bread. It's really simple. When this icing hardens, it has a beautiful glazed look on top. I think you'll find it to your liking. You're gonna need a cup of powdered sugar, about a tablespoon of cream, and a teaspoon or more of vanilla. All right, and then we're gonna stir this together until it's all mixed. All right, this is the consistency that your glaze should be. If you need to add more cream to your mixture, go ahead and do that. You wanna make sure that it has this type of consistency so that you can easily swirl it on top of your bread. All right, friends, here it is, our homemade Swedish Christmas bread. I'm gonna let it sit here for a good bit to cool down, and then I'll frost it and add our dried cranberries for that beautiful embellishment on our bread. It smells so good. As you can see, some of the cinnamon and the butter and the sugar has dripped out while it was baking. It's risen quite big, and I can't wait to enjoy it. I'm gonna wait until after supper tonight to go ahead and frost it because I think it'll just be more festive to have for dessert. So friends, that's it. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I thank you so much for coming back once again to Thuya Hill. And I'd love to know, what are some of your favorite things to bake over the Christmas holiday? Please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And as usual, thank you so much for tuning in to today's video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Goodbye for now.